They said, why? Why Jacksonville Executive Airport Flight School? Because it's more than an airport. It's more than a school. It's a community. You know, a certain minister and a certain teacher heard that there was this crazy minister walking around the community like Jesus. So another minister was like, man, you mean we're going to have a Jesus experience? He says, man, what about an angel experience? It's like, an angel experience? He says, no, what about, if you want to fly like an angel, you get into an airplane, man. He was like, how do I get people interested in that? And when I get people in those airplanes, how do I get them to understand the magnitude of understanding that's required to fly in an airplane in case there's an emergency or climate change? You know, what about turbulence? How to get them to understand turbulence? So, one of the ministers said, well, we got a bunch of churches right down the road from that flight college. And we've got one really cool community. There's a lot of artistic expression, but how do we get people to understand the artistic expression of God that they can't see? You know, the guys at Facebook was like, we get all these people in Congress to drink water. We're like, there's water in the air that you can't see. He says, look, depending on that climate change of the heat or how cool, you know, affects the brain. So then the guy at Facebook, he's like, man, I tell you what, I'll be like Silver Surfer. I'll get on a surfboard, you know? And then, well, I had my artistic expression. I says, man, you know, there was a building. I said, can we get the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, and the Space Force together and get like a clubhouse going here, you know? And it's like, well, somebody said, you know, we got to have wedding adventures, better families, better nutrition, better values, better ethics, better morals, you know, better understanding. So he says, well, if those ministers thousands of years ago said it's more than a building, the airport goes, bulldoze the building down, we're going to park a bunch of trailers there, you know, for educational tourism adventures, man. Because it's more than a building. It's a building up of the people and of the United States. How can I get them to see through that kind of darkness when it's not even dark? You know, they read that Bible and they go, out of the darkness, he brought them into the light. He says, well, is that out of the darkness of space into the light upon earth where there's actually stuff that you can see? Or is it out of the darkness of the bare lands lacking the essentials we need to be able to see properly with proper perception, you know, with proper nutrition for the mind and body and spirit? What's the spirit? Can you see the spirit? Well, if I had the proper, you know, values, morals, and ethics, then I'd have the proper environment. I've had enough water to drink, you know, and I'd have enough food to eat. And I'd have proper education systems, not only at the flight college, but at the local schools and communities. Now, how can we get people to understand that? You know, maybe they got too comfortable, you know, and they fell asleep. He says, well, you know, how do we wake them up? That's a pretty good coffee. Now, if only I could imagine standing in the darkness and I feel the wind upon my face. It's cold, you know? It doesn't stay cold that long in Florida, man, but man, when it gets cold, it's cold. You can feel it. Now, how do I get people to understand? I said something to someone back in 2010, 2011, and I'm like, hey, I'm knocking on the windows, and I'm like, hey, wake up, you know? They sent us here to help. We're trying to get you to understand, you know? It's too hot out there in the desert, and people can't think, you know? We need a proper environment, you know? Climate control. And he says, well, how do we give a sermon like that We're like, well, they've been in the heat, like in the summer, then all of a sudden they get a winter. Oh man, it's cold outside. Why? Because you could feel the particles pushing against you, transferring the energy. It's like, man, you mean it transfers the energy so fast that you can actually feel the cold? Yes. Now, if someone say, let me see, that's not true. Well, how's your perception? Because if I wanted to put a shield in place, like the Romans in the desert, they should preach like that in a church, man. The Romans in the desert, to protect each other, they'd round up in a circle. You tell me why those Romans rounded up in a circle with shields like the atmosphere. Did they come from Earth or from some other place in outer space from the kingdom of heaven? So, when those particles, it's cold, man, that means, man, those particles being cooled, had enough concentration in an area that you can't see, but it's there. You could feel it blowing in the wind on your face. Ooh, it's kind of chilly out today, But I tell you, it transfers the energy fast enough as it bounces off and reflects that light back into the darkness of space. Because, when it reflects the light off that moon in the middle of the night, it puts light even into the darkness. Well, with a proper atmosphere and proper communications, like satellite structures, communications, all that stuff, it reflects that light or that energy or that, well, you can't reflect sound, man, so why do you think we got fiber optics? Into space. How can I reflect that light? Gotta have the atmosphere. Now, if I take all that complexity and put it into simplicity, the Army asked the question over the summer. It was like summer school, man. Hey, how would you win against a superior force? How will you win against a superior force that's coming after you? A superior force, tanks and all that stuff. If you were way, way back in the past, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, I said, well, I'd dig holes and tunnels, and when those tanks rolled over, they'd fall in, and it'd point their guns up toward the sky. And they go, what do you mean? Well, if I had a flight school, man, and they go, what about those Christian religions, those non-denominational religions, those Methodist religions? What about all these different religions? How can we get them in one direction? I says, well, did you try flight school, man? Like an angel flight school, man. If we had an angel, point of view, like an innocence of the mind, a renewal of the spirit, and the way that we think to guide our lives, like that lighthouse from outer space, It reflects some to help those people in the darkness all across the universe, but it also lets some light in to help the earth. So it's like, wow, if I'm in the darkness and I can't see, but I can feel, then even in the light where there's darkness, there could be darkness. That sunlight comes from miles, millions and billions. I don't know, how far is it? Can you tell? I need a telescope for that, man. Now, those particles, what's the importance? Well, sometimes you gotta backtrack. Like, backtrack? He says, yeah, man. Now look, if I take off from a runway, those particles underneath the wings, underneath that airplane, how important are they? Is it more than a building? So, when those preachers preach in that church, those teachers teach in that school, or that college administrator says, man, we're going to have programs like this. And they go, well, if you were to take off from a runway and fly through the weather like this, man, it's cold, man. I got plenty of particles, man. Whew, this is a nice flight. But if I get over the desert, what's going to happen? Man, I'll tell you, you want to hear about faith, man. They says, man, these guys they're like, hey, man, we got this crazy minister coming to the community. He's like going to go over there and he's going to teach everybody about pilot stuff. It's like, what's pilot stuff? One of those guys stops. He goes, man, why are you standing over there with a hairdryer on a corner of the street in front of the airport, pointing a hairdryer at the sky. It's like, what does a hairdryer have to do with a flight school? And he says, well, those Romans, those Romans thousands of years ago, they stood in a circle with shields going, hey, these people in the desert are so angry, they're fighting each other because it's hot, It's climate control, man. We're trying to fix that atmosphere up there, and that's why you're like, hey, if they just had the atmosphere, all of those Roman societies were like intelligent. They're like, how do we teach those people that don't understand what we're saying? He goes, go out there and be like warriors, man. I want you to go out there with the smallest force that you have, like that movie 300, and I want you to stand there and form a wall, man. And if they don't understand the wall, then I need you to stand in a circle. And I want you to survive as long as you can. Because if you could survive throughout space and time with that kind of image, then maybe to understand how important that atmosphere is that you can't see. And they go, what's the hairdryer have to do with it? Well, if I have a hairdryer and I point it up and I turn on that heat, man, the particles start to expand. The drying out of the lands without the forestry and crops spreads the particles apart. That heat ray, that's not a man-made weapon. It's from man-made mistakes, of destroying the lands, creates a heat ray. It's not a weapon. It's a natural occurrence, man. It's like, hey, I've got a super-sized hairdryer pointing at the sky. So when I fly my plane over that thing, man, it's like, oh my God, turbulence. It's like Robin Williams going, where are we going to go, man? It's like, we couldn't understand that. Hey, you see that guy on America's Got Talent? He's like, that's what happens in the airplane. They're like, oh man, I got a whiplash. So, this is, man, what kind of flight school we're going to have? It's so confusing, man. It's like, how do you explain that to people? They're like, hey, I'm testing engine failure. All that stuff, man. It's like, well, when I fly from here and I go to that place where there's like no trees and stuff underneath and it's really hot, it's like, woo! It's like hit or miss, man. We're flipping a coin hoping it's going to work. So we're like, all those desert places, they had pyramids, artifacts, archaeology, historical things, that people need to remember to rebuild the future and then safeguard it, So we got educational tourism, like extraterrestrial teaching from the darkness of space to the darkness of earth and beyond, everything in between. It's like that sunlight reflects off of the moon and puts light in the dark, the wisdom of earth, affects the atmosphere that you can't see. Now, if I try to travel to another planet and then return, it's like, man, how much wisdom are they shining into the universe that, people can see? Because, man, if they fly and they hit that atmosphere and there's not enough there to slow down, it's like, whoa, oh man, that's terrible. So he says, well, if those Romans thousands of years ago could round up in a circle and put their shields out, like, this is what we need, man, to protect the people of Earth. We need shields, like the ones that you can't see, the atmosphere, protect you from those ultraviolet rays, man, that have cooked the planet, He says, well, if they couldn't understand the natural signs that God put there, they were like, well, how can we get them to see what God was talking about, in the beginning when God said, let there be light? He says, well, if I wanted to build a runway for people to have better lives and they can't understand the natural signs, my mom said, well, we'll make Joseph's St. Joseph Indian School, He could teach about the Indian signs, which are really the natural signs of God, and man-made signs that are the signs of God because, God inspired that. So my father says, son, I need you to get your Jeep Cherokee Indian Jeep out of my garage for that Indian school, man, and get out there and go teach those native people that don't understand. So It says, there's a song that says, "You light up my life." It's like, well, if I could just get that good wife, man, I'll put like new roads everywhere for people to discover with educational tourism, to get people on a good trend of education and how to be with their families and the communities, to build new communities, to expand those resources that we need, not only for the airplanes, but, for the people that are helping build and upkeep, like you got to have maintenance on that stuff, you need maintenance technicians and they got to eat too, so it's like, I chose, I'm a poor man. I don't have a whole lot of money, man. But I took a little bit of money I had, people gathered up together, and made sure I got all the way up the coast and back and across the country, I drove this everywhere I could. I could say guardians of the ocean, like the Navy. You feel that cool air right now? I'm in Florida. Man, I can feel that cool air. It's got some water in it. But during the summer, it gets a little warm and it's not as much water, And that's the problem we got to fix, because in other places, not a whole lot of water at all. And if your brain is mostly water, then those people really need help. They need education, So I started the guardians of the waters above, that's the atmosphere, and the waters below, the oceans, and everything in between that supports our environment, the trees, the food that you eat, the water that you drink so you don't get dehydrated, and even when you're tired, the coffee that wakes you up. United we stand, man. Not just an American term, it's like a world term for the earth, It's like, Independence Day with Will Smith, Hey, this is the day everybody works together to stand up for our independence. You know what our independence is from? Years ago, the Americans had a dream too, man. Don't think we didn't hear what Martin Luther King said, man, when he said, hey, everybody had a dream, man. All the white people had a dream. All the black people had a dream. All these other countries had a dream. Everybody had a dream. He says, well, I have a dream, And then the Americans said, well, the guy had a dream, so why don't we build the American dream? It could be black and white. And if we get black and white, then we could write it down in the black and white. Even on my tinted window, I've got light shining out to the world, man, in black and white. Guardians, united we stand, one nation educators. Now you notice it's like a pronoun, capital O, capital N, capital E, It's like, if I could get 2 wedding rings for family values joined as one, I got a wedding ring right there becoming one, And then I've got a nation, because those weddings need, educators, and I can change that E to an education, Those weddings need education. So, true education and understanding with wisdom comes from God above, and all of the things that God and all of his children, us, the United States, all over the world, no matter what country you're from, have created together to build a better world and call it Earth, a station in space, a place that everybody should save because we depend on it. In God we trust. Now that is good coffee.